Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. I see some more people trickling in. But to be conscious of time, we'll begin. This is Deepak Sharma here from the customer success practice at Deloitte. I also have my colleague Jeff Nowak from the customer success practice. And first of all, we just want to acknowledge I know there are a lot of people trying to join this from across the globe, and the time is not the best for everyone. So we understand that, we appreciate that. We will be recording this, so the recording will be available. And what we wanted to do today is really just have a conversation. We are all definitely sitting in a very unique and uncertain times. These are unprecedented times that we are in. And our goal today is to really provide you with a framework and an approach to think about how to pave a path, particularly from a customer success lens, through this uncertainty towards a successful future. And before we begin, what I wanted to do was just talk a little bit about what are the macro things that are happening, because that will kind of be the canvas on which we can then paint the CS specific pathways of the future for ourselves. So, to begin with, the number one thing that we are seeing in today's world is changing behaviors. So obviously, as things are happening around us, there's a lot of change happening. Some of it will be permanent, some of it will probably be more temporary in time. But think in terms of travel habits, think in terms of hiring and talent, think in terms of how business is conducted in the new world, think in terms of how much will remain online, how much will go back to offline in person. So I think we have to acknowledge that there'll be some permanency of some of the changing behaviors we are seeing. Along with that, what is happening is people are rethinking a lot of the orthodoxies that have existed for many years, sometimes many decades in many industries. Digital, obviously, being a key one where we are all now asking the question, how can we better enable via digital and technology the experiences that people will desire and the connectivity that is needed in the current world where we are sitting, and how to make that work even better. And then finally, as we think more, this is really a collective leadership moment for all of us across all levels, right? This is a time where we all have to bring our humanity out. We have to be empathetic, but at the same time, we have to be highly resilient to be able to pave the path through this, and then also be pragmatic in the steps that we take. So that's kind of the canvas that is laid out there. As we progress to the next slide, one of the things we think about from a customer success leadership perspective is there are three really dimensions along which you want to think. The first one is respond, is just managing the crisis. And I think a lot of companies have already put their response strategies in place. So you know how your company is thinking about respond, and that is the first thing to do. It's a major challenge in the environment is happening. How do we respond to it? How does it affect our customers and ourselves? Then the time comes that let's move into thinking about what are we learning from this and how do we emerge stronger. That's kind of your recover. And then finally, how do we prepare for the next normal, which is how do we thrive out of this at the end of it. And I think there are dimensions in all three, but I sincerely believe that we are more in the recover and thrive spectrum now. And the first step from a customer success lens there for ourselves, for all of us on the webinar as well, is to really design from the heart. And what does that mean? So as we go to the next slide, designing from the heart is really, this is the time where we have to rise and really focus on some key human tenets. And there are five of those. Let me walk through those five and then give some examples of how different organizations and how things should could evolve from there. So the very first one is that you really want to focus on all things human. And what we mean there is, how do you really think more about the values alignment, and how do you bring new experiences quickly to your customers in a time like this, which aligns more with the values. The second one is to really focus on how am I proactively delivering those values, right? And this really boils down to thinking about what are the products and offers that you can bring that your customers need right now. So it's more about really reconfiguring the capabilities and assets you have to bring those. The third thing then is, as we are doing this, we need to execute with humanity. And this is really about understanding to meet your customers where they are and bringing people together in a way that they want to be brought together, right? You might have some customers who want to be left alone for a while, and then you may have customers who really need a lot more communication and interaction right now. So, kind of understanding that and delivering that and executing that with humanity. The number fourth point is, while doing all this, you have to be truly authentic. How do you really bring that authenticity into every process and operations that you're doing? You cannot be faking this, right? You really have to treat people and not as labels or segments. And then finally, when you do all of these, what we are really doing is focusing on identifying new ecosystems of value, and that is really about changing the world, which is the last point over there. And when you step back and think of these for a minute, let me just give you some examples, right? So think of a telco company, a professional services company, along with a hardware and software company coming together at a time like this and thinking about how do we accelerate 5G in the globe, which is both a need from a humanity perspective to enable that connectivity and bandwidth, but it is also a need from a business perspective as well. Or in the consumer side, a bar that is not able to keep open, redirecting itself to provide pub in a box and delivering that by hiring out of work musicians. So it's again reconfiguration of different capabilities that people have, but coming together in a way that you're providing mutual value. So those are just a couple of examples. There are several more that we are all aware of. For example, the streaming party from a streaming service that we all know, and allowing that social interaction and group chat while watching movies with your friends and family. You have, instead of making vacuum cleaners, making ventilators, instead of making cars, redeploying that capacity to make ventilators in a time like this. So those are all different dimensions of value. And when we apply that to customer success, what we see is that from a customer success lens, you need a mind shift across three key dimensions across all levels of customer success. And I'm going to pass on the baton here to my colleague Jeff to walk us through some of those.
Thanks, Deepak, and hello to everybody on the webinar. Thanks for joining and attending. So, as Deepak mentioned, I think the question is for us in this moment is, how do we evolve the customer success mindset and really apply some of these human-centric principles, right? So that we can be engaging with authenticity and humanity. So, what we offer here is a perspective on how to think about that shift across really three core dimensions of what we consider their customer success toolkit, right? So the first and foremost is customer outcomes. And how do we authentically kind of engage customers and understand how are their outcomes changing, and how do we think differently about the definition of success, right? And two, from an insight standpoint, customer success has a really unique vantage point, being on the front lines, engaging with customers and understanding what's happening to them personally, what's happening to them with their business and their markets, and how can we unlock those insights and make sure that's coming into the organization as well to make your collective organization smarter and more nimble in these moments. All right, and last is thinking about value. So traditionally, we want to make sure customers are getting value from the products and our services and our portfolio. But how do we really expand the aperture right now and think about how we can create value across the entire relationship? So let's talk about each of those a little bit more. The pillar of customer success, right, is understanding customer outcomes and making sure that they're successful in what they're trying to achieve. And that's never going to change. That should always be the focus of customer success. What's happening now and what's certainly changing is your customer outcomes are getting redefined, right? Whatever they might have been a month ago, they're likely different today. So we need to engage customers and make sure we understand how their business is changing, how their priorities are changing, and what is that new definition of success. So how to think about that? I mean, a couple things is, one, I think using the rhythm and cadence of success planning is an excellent tool to create that human engagement, right? To authentically reach out and say, I want to understand, what is your new definition of success? What is going on with you? What are you experiencing? And really uncovering those insights around, the new challenges and how you can possibly help, right? I think the other thing that we're noticing, and certainly to think about, is how do you, reconsider and take a fresh look at segmentation. So in these moments and for the next several quarters, there are going to be industries that are experiencing dynamically different circumstances. Some will be overwhelmed with new volume and new demand, while others are struggling to recover and deal with, negative impacts on their business and demand, right? And so you have to consider those elements as you look at your customer base. But likewise, even within those individual industry sectors, there's a lot of granularity of what's happening with different companies. Those who are already digitally enabled might be exceeding and actually still facing growing demand, while others who may not be ready for that transformation might be raising their hand and saying, now is the time for us to get ahead and think about these dynamics. So even within individual industry landscapes, there are dynamics going on that we think you should be considering in how you segment your base. Likewise, what's going on with the team? What's going on with the customers that you're dealing with? What's happening to their team? And what's the right way you should be engaging them? Maybe traditionally it was phone calls, and now it should be video, or maybe now it should be email. Maybe they don't want to hear from you as often, right? So considering those dynamics as well. And then how does all of that feed into, thinking about your health scoring, and how do you kind of proactively and predictively monitor your customer base, right? What new factors can you bring into your scoring, whether those be industry or company health? But also, are you watching new behaviors? Are you noticing new activities across your user base that are giving you indicators of where there might be risk, or even where there might be new needs and new opportunities that didn't exist before, right? So those are some things to think about as you first try to understand what are those new outcomes and how do we understand those better. And then next, moving then to insights. So from the vantage point of understanding customers, right? Now customer success has insights that are hugely valuable. So as we think about the market right now, companies need to have real-time insights around what's happening with customers, what's happening in the market, where are there opportunities, where do we need to back off? Like, how do we think about, the changing landscape in real time? Because it's all uncertain and it's evolving quickly. And customer success has really got an interesting, seat at the table now to offer those insights from customers, right? So think about the fact that while traditionally you were offering insights around the product and product usage, now you can offer insights around what's going on with the company, what's going on with the team, what's going on internally, what are they seeing in the market. These are hugely valuable insights that we need to find a way to bring into the organization and kind of unlock, right? So that we can make ourselves smarter and more nimble to what's happening. So, a couple things there I would say is, one, going back to some of the things Deepak said, how do we think about actually characterizing what we're hearing in the market in a human way? So one thing I've always found is incredibly valuable is capturing those testimonials and those insights and those commentary in the human voice and make it truly real for your organization as you bring that inside. Another that we're seeing is certainly leveraging executive sponsorship. So where you can get your executives to also be reaching out to your customers and having those peer-to-peer executive conversations. Not only is that great to demonstrate your commitment, but it also gives leaders across your organization a chance to hear what's happening in the market and to bring those insights in, right? I also think that make sure that your customer success team holistically is sharing insights and hearing these ideas collectively as well, right? How do you unlock the commentary, the challenges, so that your team is collectively getting smarter and proactively anticipating what could be happening to their customers as it happens across the portfolio, right? And last is also, as a customer success leader, making sure that you've got regular engagement with sales, with marketing, with product teams. Like, now is the time for all of the commercial teams to really have a tight integration and to be sharing those real-time market perspectives. So everybody can be, collectively leveraging those insights to inform marketing messaging, right? To help the sales team think about what's the right messaging and maybe some new use cases that are emerging in the market. And obviously with your product teams, how can we think about the product and our solutions and what are creative ways to add value and help right now, right? Which brings me to our third point, which is creating value. So a common mantra within customer success, right, is the idea of let's ensure that customers get the most value they can from the product and services that they buy from us. So we would suggest that at this time, how do you expand the lens of that to say, what are all of the ways that customers can get value from our relationship? Not just the product, not just our services, but from doing business with one another and how we work together, right? And the holistic relationship, right? And so there's a couple of ways I think teams and organizations can think about that. And the first is from the standpoint of your offerings. As you observe new use cases, as you observe new challenges or anticipate new challenges, what are ways that your product can solve new challenges? Or certainly there are some companies out there that are unlocking premium features or value-added services because right now their customers need those services. They need those offerings more than ever just to help them be successful, right? So to the extent that you can unlock those features and build goodwill and trust and kind of long-term engagement with your customers by giving them the tools they need right now, right? That's an excellent way to demonstrate value and offer that support. Other ways are to take a step back and look at your company holistically and think about capabilities and expertise that you have, insights that you have across the entire organization, and think about ways that you can bundle that or bring that to your customers, right? I think, as well, just sort of similar to this chat that we're doing right now and other, similar engagement moments like this, which is, can you just help your community of users come together? Maybe you can facilitate more community engagement for them right now, right? And bring a group of users together who want to share stories, express how they're each, encountering challenges and how they're overcoming it, or maybe just to talk to some familiar faces and people that are going through the same thing and just have that camaraderie, right? So how can you help facilitate that kind of humanity and that kind of engagement right now? And last, I think certainly as well is, thinking about the community and the values and those activities and elements that are important to us and to our organizations that extend beyond the transactional relationship, right? So, there are certainly examples of companies that are now working together, coming together to go solve problems in the community, right? And to get creative about how do we help, what we're seeing in our local community or in the industry that we serve in a way that can help others, right? So those are some different ways to think about it. I think the important thing right now is how do you expand the lens of how you define value and consider more human ways that you can help and engage your customers. Deepak?
No, Jeff, I think that's right. Before I go on to the next slide, just a quick this thing. I did put it in the QA window as well, but if you have questions or clarifications, the Q&A window can be leveraged, and if you type it in there, we'll try to respond as much as possible in real time, or also keep a few minutes at the end of this so that we can answer questions that may be coming. If we move to the next slide, I think more to kind of wrap it up in these challenging times. Sorry. The first thing, is as you're going through this, is to keep that human connectivity and the human needs in mind, as we talked about, right? That's the canvas on which these three dimensions come together. The next one then really is redefining the outcomes. And I think this is not just the outcomes that usually we want for our products and offerings that we're giving to our customers, but truly even taking it further beyond not what outcomes customers will get from our stuff, but what outcomes are customers trying to do right now, period, right? That's it. And understanding that and then bringing that back, that's where the third thing comes in. And the way you bring that back is through the signals and insights you're getting. And here, customer success is sitting at a very unique intersection point. On one side, you are getting the market-centered insights that Jeff was talking about. You're talking to your customers, you're seeing what they're going through, and you're truly understanding kind of What are the emotions? What is the why behind the actions they are taking that's driving them? On the other side, you're also very well connected inside the firm as the key customer advocate within your organization. You're talking to all the leaders, you're talking to all the functions. You also have a very good idea of what is the emotional and business pulse of your own organization. So sitting over there, then you get to the last point, which is you look at your customers, you look at your firm, you look at your partners, maybe even look at your suppliers, and you think about a whole different ecosystem that is coming together to create these new solutions, right? Uh, I already gave some examples, but another good example that comes to mind is car cleaning services that are right now not active, but leveraging their workforce to start providing sanitization and cleaning services for the facilities and institutions that are open for essential services. So that took all of these four elements to come together to kind of redirect that in many areas. And now, if you think about it, all of these four elements have come together. You're being very human. There are people getting affected in a way they shouldn't. You're finding an equivalent way to keep the livelihood going. Outcomes, definitely redefined outcomes in this state, right? The whole outcome has changed. You got to that by understanding the signals you were getting. You were thinking about business from a different lens, as Jeff was saying, and you've created a whole new ecosystem of value. So I think that is what we would like to end on today. Uh, that's kind of our talk and our thinking, and hopefully it's something that sparks an innovation and sparks more thinking within your own groups and with your own ecosystem of partners and customers and vendors and suppliers and so on and so forth. But we wanted to keep it short. We wanted to get the message out and just have the conversation. We'll open it up for any Q&A right now. And if the group is very silent, then you'll all get 7 or 8 minutes back in your day, which I'm sure we all will not regret either. But I'll keep it open and see. I see some questions starting to trickle in over here. Uh, so let me see. We have a question around leveraging platform to facilitate collaboration. One of the challenge we are dealing with is concern for IP proliferation. And are there any suggestions? Uh, so I will begin with a typical consulting answer. It depends. But what I would say is that definitely that does come up. I think this is one where let me give a contextual example, and then I'll give kind of the approach I think we would say, and Jeff, feel free to jump in. So a contextual example is for a very large organization, think of like $60 billion and more in revenue. At a time like this, they have relaxed a lot of the rules to make stuff happen for their customers. So things where legal and risk might take 6 weeks to approve is happening in 6 hours. And they are removing a lot of the clauses. They are taking a risk. So that's one end of the spectrum. And I think that goes to my answer and approach is I think what you have to think about it is what is the IP, where it's classified within your organization, and then what is the spectrum of risk that the enterprise, your organization, the leadership is willing to take in a time like this. And at the same time, having kind of a frank discussion, an honest discussion, over whether it's video call or phone call, to really understand both parties and lay it out there to say, we are in this situation. This is what we want to do. This is the concern. And what could be like maybe a new construct that comes out to kind of protect that IP, to take care of that. Um, Jeff, anything to add on that?
No, I don't think I have anything on the IP point. I think you covered that well. I see a point in here around authenticity, and maybe we can riff on that a little bit. So the question is, thanks for the pitch. Use the term authenticity a number of times. What have you seen to operationalize this? Concrete actions, KPIs, practices. Another good opportunity for a consulting answer here, I think. Here's how I think about this one, which is, it's challenging, but I think it's important that you instill, kind of a baseline of understanding across your team of how to have authentic customer engagement with your customers, right? So a couple things with that. One is, I do think you have to make sure you give your customer success teams permission to not be talking about commercial items, right? To relax the focus on commercial and being worried about renewals and adoption and some of those, you know, normal performance metrics in this moment. I think you just need to give them the comfort that that's not that's not where you start the conversation. So I think that's number one. Number two is I do think related to that, your company needs to think about how you're going to approach the need for maybe requests for discounting or issues that are happening financially. There's another question coming in around foreign exchange rates and contracts. So I think, you know, related to this, which is like, don't leave it to your individual CSMs to be solving these issues in the moment, right? So I think it is, you know, take a step back, think about what your overall policies are going to be and some kind of consistent approaches, and then enable your teams with that approach. I think that's number one, is take that liberty or that issue away from them and structure it. And then two, you know, I think using success planning and the notion of tell me about your outcomes and help me understand what you're trying to accomplish. To me, the framing of that dialogue gets you at the authenticity, right? And I think as long as your teams are truly engaging that conversation authentically, customers pick up on that and receive it well.
I would agree with that, and then I think we have maybe time for one or two more questions. So one is around what would be your recommendations on how a customer success leader approaches other customer-facing teams such as sales to team up and avoid overlaps and power struggle on who should approach the customer at the executive level. Um, I think this is a universal question. This is a challenge that exists whether we are in the current times or not. And I think this boils down to the what I would call the digital DNA of your organization. You have to align the approach to the digital DNA of your organization to make sure what is the collaboration nature that exists within the organization that you are in, and then leverage that. The other thing to do over here is ensuring that customer success leadership has a seat at the table, which is a peer to the other functions. I won't belabor the point here. I think there's a lot more detail behind this, but I would say those two factors kind of come together to really define the approach. There isn't a universal approach that can be devoid of the digital DNA or culture of your organization, and then kind of where customer success sits within your organization. Those two are critical inputs to this. Anything to add, Jeff, to that, or?
The only thing I would add is I've heard multiple data points now of, at a minimum, marketing, sales, and customer success leaders just having a weekly 30-minute sync, whatever that is, and just so I would just say, you know, trying to create that very simple, streamlined but regular engagement, and notwithstanding politics and bigger issues, you know, just facilitating that engagement so that you can create, you know, the basic momentum. I think that's happening in a lot of organizations right now. Best practices around identifying. I'll try this last one. We'll try to finish with a flourish. Best practices around identifying existing gaps between customer needs and business goals and narrowing those gaps. A two-parter. I'd say there's a couple things come to mind quickly on that. First of all, I think you know, the question is predicated on the strength of your existing success plans and how well you're documenting outcomes. So I think, you know, the first is whether you have that today or you don't, taking a step back and making sure you have a sense of articulating what you think the existing business outcomes are, and be granular with that, right? And so that you can then have a conversation and talk to the customer about validating that and then discussing, you know, what might have changed. I think before having those conversations as well, I think teams are getting together and just sort of brainstorming what are the, you know, key 3, 4, 5 questions we want to ask customers right now to get at, you know, the key business challenges. And I think, because I think you want to ask them broad enough questions that where you might identify some new gaps or new business priorities that maybe if just speaking to your previous product related outcomes wouldn't get you there. So take a step back, think about the kind of 3 to 4 key business questions, right? What's going on in your business? How are you being impacted by the market, customers, and demand? How is your role being changed? What's happening to your team right? And come up with that couple of key sets of questions coupled with what you think the current outcomes are. And I think bringing those things to bear, again, now that you're having an authentic conversation with the customer, which is, I just want to understand what you're up to and what your new challenges are so I can respond accordingly.
Yeah, and
Deepak, anything to add?
yeah, I would build one thing on that, Jeff. I think it's not just about the existing gaps between the needs and goals, but it is also about having that conversation with your customers to understand for the outcomes they're trying to drive, what are the things they also have to do, and having that transparency, because this is a moment where you need shared accountability much more than you did before. So it's not just about these are my needs and you need to deliver, but it's also about this is the shared outcome we are driving to, this is the mutual value we'll get, these are the things I have to do, these are the things, Mr. Customer, you have to do. And so kind of creating that joint accountability plan as part of your success plan, I think is a key best practice out here for that question. I know we are kind of over time, so I think we will end it here. But once again, thank you for everyone. We will have the recording. We will send that out. Our contacts will be in the materials we send out. Feel free to reach out to Jeff or me at any time, and looking forward to having some more coffee conversations, even if they are virtual, in the near future. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.